Hello, everyone. It's been a while since I've done a video. We're going to talk about covert narcissism today. This is just a disclaimer. Obviously, I am not a mental health professional. These are just my observations, things I've learned from personal experience and my own research. If you're having serious issues, I encourage you to seek help. Also, if you find the video helpful, please consider liking, sharing the video, or even subscribing. There are some people out there who are very good at concealing their true nature. A profoundly destructive person can hide behind the mask of quote unquote normalcy. These individuals can be hypersensitive. They seem to oscillate internally between feelings of grandiosity and feelings of deep insecurity, inferiority, and inadequacy. These simmering feelings seem to manifest in a far more subtle way, making it hard to pick up on. Eventually, though, you're going to start to notice, or you might, hopefully, start to notice the levels of self-referencing. What that means by self-referencing is that everything has to be all about them. And the way that they perceive and relate to things is about themselves too. It's their way of viewing things. Everything is self-focused for them. So you'll notice when you talk about something with them, they might kind of make it about themselves. That's what we mean by self-referencing. This is what makes them painfully sensitive to any type of criticism. They view criticism as a betrayal, quote unquote. You owed them adoration and constant praise. Their black and white thinking causes them to view you as an enemy. You're either for them or against them. The black and white or dichotomous thinking that they go into is when something happens, they view this as sort of like that they're being attacked, like their identity is being attacked or something. So they view it as an attack, and they do see it as a betrayal. They are super sensitive to insults or feeling as if they've been slighted. They may not acknowledge these feelings to anyone, but they'll bottle them up inside and they'll brood and seethe about it. Somebody did something or said something, and instead of just saying to that person, oh, you did this and I didn't like it or whatever, they're not upfront like that. They just seethe about it inside, and they'll ruminate on it and think about it. The interesting thing about them is their latent rage. There is this perpetual self-victimization. If only people appreciated me. If only people gave me the respect I deserve. If only others saw my unique specialness. If only others recognized my greatness. It's sort of like, and I know I've used this word before on other videos on the channel, it's the special boy syndrome. It's sort of like that, the perpetual self-victimizing. Their greatest fear often is being exposed because they are so painfully self-aware. There are some predatory people or narcissistic people who are not aware of their behaviors, or that they don't have boundaries or filters or whatever. And they're grandiose and they think that they're amazing and wonderful, but not the vulnerable kind. They tend to guilt trip, and they are prone to envy and bitterness. They allow these feelings to fester, turning from envy and bitterness into like rage and contempt. They want to be seen by other people as humble, meek, and they want to come off as like very non-threatening. They might be very soft-spoken, They might come off as like overly polite. They're very aware of and focused on how other people perceive them. They do take pleasure in the misfortune of others. They delight in it. They don't outwardly express these feelings because they know that it would contradict the veneer of meekness that they have worked so hard to construct. But they do feel it inside because they do see themselves as superior and victimized. They tend to minimize the achievements of others. If you got recognized for like a work project that you put in a lot of time and energy into, they will find a way to like backhandedly compliment you while subtly suggesting that you had it easy this time, or that it wasn't really that hard, but oh, congratulations, I'm happy for you. And you can tell that like you may not be able to like immediately sense that there was something like backhanded to that. It could come off as like, oh yes, they're congratulating me, but kind of being silly or whatever. Yeah, but they'll do that over and over again. If something happens to them, like they get passed over for a promotion at work, rather than do like self-reflection and think about what they did wrong or how they could improve, they see themselves as victim, and the person who maybe got the promotion instead is to blame for that. And then they will focus their rage, their seething contempt on that person rather than look at themselves and think about, well, what could I do differently, to get the promotion? Or rather than considering maybe this other person, this other coworker, maybe they've been working really hard and maybe they did earn it and deserve it. They don't think that way because, again, everything is about them, and that's their frame of reference. You will notice slowly over time that they're never satisfied or content with things, even if they have a relatively privileged life compared to other people. They don't see it that way. And sometimes if something good happens, well, it could have been better. If someone does something kind for them, well, maybe they only did that so they could hold it over my head later, or they suggest that there might be some like hidden ulterior motive. They chronically view themselves as victimized. So even when someone does a kindness for them, they're still being victimized in their mind because, again, like they don't trust that that was done just out of the goodness of that person's heart or whatever, that there must be a reason for that, right? That is a not good one. Rather than be upfront or even like getting in your face when they're angry with you, they tend to act out in passive aggressive ways. So while you might tell somebody like, oh, you did this and it upset me and this is why, so like you could talk about it and then resolve it, the covert narcissist would prefer instead to play mind games, to give you the silent treatment, to pick a fight about something else and then find a way to blame you for it, to again kind of punish you. They're so hypersensitive that it isn't just to criticism. They're hypersensitive to any feedback at all. If you try to give them constructive criticism, like in a legitimate effort to help them, they're not going to see it that way. They see this as an attack that they have to like defend themselves from. And the reason for that is because they feel humiliated by any feedback that doesn't validate their worldview. They seem to always be lashing out at the world and how unfair it is to them specifically. This leads them to not really doing anything, but constantly complaining about how uniquely hard things are for them. They have a lot of paranoia because they really do believe that everyone is out to get them. And they usually live their entire lives thinking this, even about friends and family, which is very sad that they feel like they can never let down their guard. And it doesn't matter how much you try to show them that you care for them or you want to help them, they will always have these lingering doubts about your intentions. And then they'll look for things to validate their doubts. They might engage in projection, like maybe they assume because they have bad intentions when they do something nice for somebody, that that must mean everybody else does too. They exhibit a sullen arrogance and a quiet rage that stems from their deep insecurities, but at the same time, they also have inflated and exaggerated feelings of entitlement. This causes them to eventually have problems in their relationships. If you don't do enough for them, then they go right back into self-victimization as they begin to diminish, devalue, and dismiss you. If you do something that wounds their fragile ego, you are now just another person who let them down. For people who have a lot of empathy and compassion, that makes you particularly vulnerable, thinking that you can save or fix them. And this can be applied to men or women, you know. I can save her. I can fix him. You feel empathy for their pain on the one hand, and you want to take it away, but you also feel exhausted from the onslaught of their ongoing psychological abuse. In the early stages, when you first meet these kinds of narcissists, they maintain the mask and they turn on the charm. They hide their identity behind a mask of concern for you, but it is phony. It's not real. In time, you will start to see that what they say versus what they do, that like their words and actions are not in alignment. They will say something and then you look at what they do and you can see that there is inconsistency there. They have an insane ability to make you feel guilty about something or indebted to them. If they've done something for you, or if they've done something to help you, they make sure you are reminded about how caring and selfless they are and how much they do for you and how nobody else does as much for you as them. But they also want you to feel that perhaps you've been a bit of a burden on them and you're the lucky one to have them in your life. Outwardly, they feign humbleness and down-to-earth vibes. They can engage in charming banter and make self-deprecating jokes that seem to camouflage their secret feelings of superiority and, again, specialness, because they're special. They have a constant need for attention and validation, and this is all long-term and pervasive. They are very negative people, and they are often disagreeable. Their pain is worse than everyone else's, and they exaggerate it to avoid having to take responsibility or accountability for maybe their life not being the way that they want it to be, or them not achieving the things that they think that they're entitled to. Whether that's success or money. They might try to sabotage the people closest to them out of envy, bitterness, and insecurity. They're controlling but devaluing. They want to be admired and idealized, but they control other people through guilt tripping and shaming. And they feel at the same time superior, but also hopelessly inadequate. So there's this constant, it's like an inversion, you know, it's this bizarre cognitive dissonance of feeling contradictory things. You feel superior, but you feel hopelessly inadequate. If they are confronted with a lie that they've told or any kind of criticism, they jump into blame shifting, projection, and scapegoating. often that is directed at the person who pointed out the lie or made the criticism. They can tell you in a perfectly calm and measured way how everything is your fault, how they have done everything for you and you have never done anything for them. They can become withdrawn, sulking, and come across as a quote unquote perfectionist. But what that really is just a manifestation of their desire for control. They want to be in control of everything because internally they feel out of control. They don't see you as a complex, real human being. They see you as an artifact or an object or a tool. Because of this, in the beginning, they will idealize you. They'll put you up on a pedestal and they will tell themselves that you could be the answer for their misery, their chronic boredom, their loneliness, etc. You'll never be able to, of course, live up to this idealized version of yourself. And when you don't, they get mad at you. And they really do feel betrayed. They feel like you've lied to them. You tricked them, you know? They hide behind the mask of false humility. They will moralize to others to hide their own flaws. Inside, they are seething with rage, while on the outside, appearing calm and composed. Rather than outright threatening you when mad, because that could be used to make them look bad, they'll often imply a threat in a backhanded way. They do things like punish people who love them by withdrawing and deliberately withholding love and affection. They are petty and vindictive, so they often project these qualities onto other people unfairly. They can become at times hostile, sadistic, and incredibly vile. If they think that they're being attacked by an enemy, they will release their fury, but again, they'll do so in a calculated, controlled way. Not in an emotional outburst type of way. They are able to control themselves. They're so much harder to spot and to point out to others because they can feign empathy and compassion so well. They can even feel empathy and compassion, like they do have feelings. Narcissists do have feelings. Regardless of what some people may think, of course they do. They are able to feel these things. It's just in a limited sense, and it is short-lived. It is like a shallow, it's not deeply felt. But they do have feelings, and they do feel it. So they will feel empathy and compassion, but it's usually self-serving, or it's for their own gain and reputation. And this may not even be and they may not even be aware of that. It's like it's not intentional, perhaps. They may say things like, everyone takes advantage of me, or my problem is I'm just too nice, or things like, I'm just so selfless and compassionate. For people who are the closest to them, they have a life of misery, abuse, and neglect because they're constantly going through this turmoil, this instability, and they are constantly having these feelings imposed on them of going through the cycle of devaluation, being discarded, being diminished, and all the other abusive things that really narcissists do. They're highly skilled at pretense and have probably spent their entire lives pretending. They learn to be like an actor. They learn, this is how I should, this is how a sad person should look, and then they kind of like mimic that. It's not to say that they don't feel sadness. Of course they do, but they're good at pretending and acting. They are calculated and cunning and always desire to have the upper hand. They will exploit people to get what they want. They will treat strangers better than loved ones. They're so concerned with their public image because they know they are something else on the inside. There is a lack of sincerity. They self-aggrandize, but their ego is incredibly fragile. If you haven't dealt with a covert narcissist, You will not see them coming. By the time you have started to figure out that you've been misled, it will be too late. Every single narcissist is different, and narcissism is a spectrum. It is important for people to understand that everyone has and exhibits some narcissistic traits. When we're talking about calling somebody a narcissist or a covert narcissist, what we mean by that is there is a pervasive pattern of superiority to the extremes that it becomes a problem. And again, pervasive, persistent, long term. Not everybody that does or exhibits some of these qualities is a narcissist. And I think that people are, hearing this stuff, they're becoming educated on this stuff, and they kind of maybe don't understand that, like, this is something that everybody has. Everybody's narcissistic to a degree. But we're talking about when it is pervasive, long-term, and extreme. The covert narcissist will get you to feel sorry for them. They will share sob stories. They'll tell you how bad they've been hurt. They might even present an image of a damaged, broken person that just needs to be loved. They will love bomb you, and you'll become the center of their world. They'll get you addicted to their excessive attention and validation. They'll tell you what you want to hear. They will future fake. They'll make all kinds of false promises. Some that they know they have no intention of following through on, but some they themselves actually believe, and they actually mean it at the time that they're saying it, because they have convinced themselves that you are the answer to all of their problems, and they project all of this like idealized stuff onto you before they get to know you, and inevitably you won't live up to it. They'll act humble, trustworthy. They will ask you questions about your past. They'll seem very interested in you. Like, it's very flattering. They'll ask things about, like, oh, what is your relationship with your parents like, or your family, or what's your relationship with your dad like, or what is your relationship with your mom like? And then all the while they're asking you these questions, and you think that you're having like a deep conversation with them and you're bonding and connecting. They're like taking notes. You're thinking, oh wow, we have such a wonderful connection, and they're like, oh wow, I just learned all these things that I can then kind of like apply later. And then, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they get bored, and boom, you're devalued, you're discarded. And all of those things that they learned about you, all of these little things that you confided in them, like, they have learned already what makes you tick. They know what your fears are and your insecurities and what your weaknesses are. And in a moment when it is convenient for them, they will weaponize these things and kind of go in for the kill. Then they'll play innocent and even childlike to further disarm you, but also to get you to fall in love with the damaged, hurt little person, the hurt little child inside them. But when you understand that this is sort of like, it's an act in a way. It is very sinister. Although, they are inside like wounded children. That is true, but they'll play it up and they'll exaggerate it, knowing that your instincts to protect, nurture, and empathize are, that's going to get that reaction. They become cold, and then they play mind games. They'll make it clear you no longer hold their interest. They'll start to lavish attention and affection on others in the hopes that you see it. They'll message you, and then as soon as you reply, they'll ignore you again for hours, maybe even sometimes days. They'll compare you to other people, better people. They'll gush about their friends they have that never criticize them or hold them accountable for anything. And you're such a bad friend, if only you could be more like these other friends they have that don't question them, that don't ever try to hold them accountable for something, that never point out when they've told a lie. They will become distant, condescending, and dismissive. They want to tap into your jealousies and insecurities and your desire to quote unquote fix things. They know you'll want to get back in their good graces. They will be hot and cold, they'll send you mixed signals, and then they'll sit back and laugh to themselves at your hurt and confusion. More and more, they might become a quote unquote different person, it seems. But what is actually happening is simply the revealing of their true hidden nature. It is the removal of the mask after they have already slipped in the knife. They will say and feel that you are the one that has been hurting them. You might find yourself apologizing to them after they have done something wrong. That is how good and subtle and long-lasting their manipulations and machinations are. Things become more and more one-sided, and you'll bend over backward for them, but you'll notice that they are not doing the same for you. They expect and demand total loyalty, but again, it is never returned. They will use things you have confided in them as proof that you're a bad person. Sadly, they can become emotionally as cold as ice and distant and more focused on getting you in line and compliant. If you do complain about this and try to bring up that you're trying to hold them accountable for something, they'll just pick apart everything you say. They'll twist the things you say, and they'll do it on purpose. You'll say one thing that is, you're saying it in good faith, and you're trying to resolve what seems to be some kind of problem, with them, with the two of you, but they won't acknowledge their role in anything. And they'll just try to say, oh, are you saying this? So what you're really saying is this? And you're like, no, I'm not saying that at all. But this is how they do this. And then they just start using you as like an outlet for their anger and rage. They do sort of like these shock and awe techniques. It's like a dazzling thing, sort of like something a magician does. The shock and awe. So maybe it's an overreaction to something, and they overreact to such a degree that you're ground down into submission because it takes you by surprise. You're confused by the seeming over response. And they're just hypersensitive to any kind of setbacks that happen in their life. Like, they have this feeling of entitlement where they think that they should have things that they didn't earn. And they feel that they're self-victimized. They feel victimized by the world because the world just hasn't recognized yet their greatness. And if only they had more attention, if only they had a bigger platform, if only this happened, then that they would really succeed, and then they would accomplish these lofty goals they have, and everything would be great. Yes, so anyways, this is that's pretty much it for now. I'm interested to hear what you guys think about this. I'm sure that everyone has known someone like this at some point in their life, usually a family member or a parent. So I'm interested to hear what you guys think in the comments. Have a good day. Wee!